Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today for this DZone virtual roundtable. We have just released our latest trend report, Cloud Native, championing cloud development across the SDLC, which you can download right now at dzone.com. Cloud Native is deeply entrenched in our everyday tools, processes, and more, yet it remains an evolving and innovative solution across the software development industry. Organizations rely on cloud-centric state of development that allows applications to remain resilient and scalable in what is an ever-changing landscape. Amidst markets concerns, tool sprawl, and the increased need for cost optimization, there are a few conversations more important today than the conversation around cloud native efficacy at organizations. Before we get started, though, I want to introduce everyone to you. I'm Jesse, Chief Technologist here at DZone, and your moderator for today's discussion. With me, as you can see, is a distinguished panel of experts, many of which you have seen before, each bringing a wealth of knowledge and a unique perspective. So first up, Eric Wave, Eric Chabel, Observations on Cloud Native Observability. You wrote that article. Thank you so much. Working as the Director of Technical Marketing and Evangelism at Chronosphere. Swaroop Wave, product marketer at Wiz. Alan, it's good to have you back. Wrote Orchestrating the Cloud, Increase Deployment Speed and Avoid Downtime, super important. Director of External Outreach and Software Strategy at Lockheed Martin. It's good to have you back. Kellen, hey, Kellen. The impact of AI and platform engineering on cloud natives evolution. Super cool. Can't wait to get into a little bit of that. Everybody loves AI. Thanks for coming back. Director of Data and AI at Silk. Maria Wave, hi. Wrote Optimizing Cloud Spend in the New Era. Head of Growth at Microtica. Cost is a super huge concern, especially in today's market. And Ray Wave, hey, it's good to have you back. Wrote The Maturing of Cloud Native Microservices Development and a Solutions Architect at Soltech. It's so good to have each and every one of you. I hope you're going to have as much fun with this today as I am. To kick us off, though, when I was doing a little bit of research to find out industry growth, right? Software, I think, is going to grow for a long time. But over the next 5 years, the compound annual growth rate is only about 10.5%. However, right, especially for some of us in the industry, we might think, oh, we're there. We've arrived. We're cloud native. No, not even a little bit. Because cloud native technologies are going to be more than double with a CAGR of 23.3% over the next 5 years. So given this whole idea of, this is a super important topic, there's still a lot of companies trying to do this well. And taking a look at container usage specifically, that's gone from 56% in 2023, right? New cloud native apps to 65% in 2024. So pretty good jump. These types of architectures are being considered for all these new applications. So my question to you, and I'm going to have Eric go first. What specific examples have you observed over the last year of cloud native design being applied to new applications or projects? What do you see out there, Eric?
So from my viewpoint, a lot of it has to do with the observability landscape. So you're seeing the results of what they've done and then the struggles they're having with monitoring all this kind of stuff. And
Okay.
I think one of the things you're seeing is the ability to have business growth is a good thing. I mean, it's what we're all trying to achieve. But I think those numbers you mentioned that are being a little bit tempered has a lot to do with quantifying this growth in a way that you can also manage it all. And you're not being hammered by all the data that's being generated, and you're not being hit with all the extra costs that are spinning out of a cloud native environments. Because when you're successful and when you're successful really quickly, that's almost auto expanding, auto handling the infrastructure for what you need to do. You basically have described the environment you want your products to run in, your services to run in. And when we get really famous, we get really big, really fast, and you don't really have a leash to call it back. And then you figure out the areas where you forgot to say, hey, I don't need all this kind of data over here. I'm only looking at dashboards and monitoring stuff over here, which is about 60% less than what I'm ingesting. So that's a lot of what we're seeing and a lot of what we're dealing with the various customers that pull us in and opportunities we're seeing out there.
Okay. Lots of observability, trying to handle scale, grow, and keep an eye on cost. All right. Those are big things. What else? Swerve, what do you got?
Jesse, we're seeing a very interesting trend, right? What we see is what I call is like 2.0 of cloud modernization. We see a lot of particularly, like, I know I saw your point about like, hey, traditional software growth has not been as exciting, but cloud native is really exciting. And what we're really seeing is that a lot of traditional industries, let's say healthcare, banking, finance, that kind of did a lift and shift approach to cloud are now like making that transition over to a replatforming the journey to cloud native applications, right? So we're seeing the growth of a lot of like new microservices, new container-based applications being designed, and an industry that quite often surprises a bit. So a lot of unexpected industries are investing a lot in Kubernetes first.
Okay, very cool. And Alan, you work for a small no-name company, Lockheed
one
Martin.
of those companies that might surprise you that we use a lot of Kubernetes, maybe, but we do, yeah. And I think that definitely resonated with that idea of we're seeing a lift and shift, but then also you have to turn around and then make it cloud native, because otherwise you don't get the scalability that you think, oh, I'm cloud native, I've moved over to Kubernetes, it's automatically scalable. Not so much. I think the other thing that I've seen that's really cool, one of my colleagues has done a lot of work with Ray, which is a Python framework for deploying machine learning to Kubernetes clusters. And what strikes me about that is we already think of Kubernetes as this really high level abstraction on top of containers, on top of operating systems, on top of networks. And then what we're seeing is the movement toward even more frameworks on top of that, right? So we're pushing to that point where we hardly have to write any code, and then just magical things happens. And I love that, because I think it does drive some of the differential growth that you're seeing in cloud native, that the ease of getting started. I do also wonder about, like, the kind of stuff that Eric talked about, right? Like how are we going to observe these incredibly complex stacks with all these layers of abstraction?
That's crazy. Yeah. And speaking of containerization, I mean, we're going to talk about that next, but Ray, Maria, Kellen, anything before I move us over to containerization? What do y'all think?
Well, from my perspective, what I see, I'm working on more on the smaller side of applications, and what I see that now is that even in small applications, going with Kubernetes and cloud native makes the entire ecosystem within that organization a bit easier to manage from the developer's workstation all the way up. And because of the additional tooling that we've talked about here, before, I've been wanting to do this for years, but you'd introduce it to a team like, oh my goodness, this is so much to know. But now the tooling and everything is getting to be to the point that it becomes something practical to use, in everyday life for a developer, and all the way up through the stack, even for small applications.
Okay. Kellen, you were going to say something. Jump in there.
I was going to add on top of that, as many companies are trying to embrace this whole idea of microservices and containerization, they had these monolithic environments that they weren't able to do this to. What I am testing now, and I'm not going to say any cloud vendor or anything else like this, is that you can now take PaaS database solutions, and they are containerizing them so you can run them on any cloud. And this means that what was a PaaS solution that only ran in Google, you can run now in Azure, you can run in AWS. And this allows them to be multi-cloud and not feel like they're being locked in. And that means that they're a little more comfortable in saying, I need to keep this in SQL Server, I need to keep this in Oracle, or in this flavor of PostgreSQL. They're able to now expand and go into a PaaS solution that they know they can ship anywhere.
That's awesome.
It's a huge point. Yeah, I agree completely with that.
And it's really cool. I mean, I'm going to take something that Ray said and put it together with something that Alan said and switch our conversation. Watch this bit of magic. So Ray was like, on one hand, it's very practical, right? We talked about how this is a very practical solution. And Alan said, tools on top of tools feels like it's magic. So this whole idea of practical magic, as we're taking, even throw in what Kellen said, of taking some real traditional old school, dinosaurs and moving them into the cloud, is really interesting, because sometimes we'll work with SaaS companies so much we'll think that it's done already. We've already arrived, but there's so much software that's not there. But containerization, orchestration, these things are established norms now, right? They're kind of, a lot of people are doing it. So as we provide these convenience layers on top that Alan was talking about, this magic, we imagine these tools are going to continue to catch up to usage rates of like Docker and Kubernetes, maybe. But as we think through that, I want to think through the term market saturation, right? These management tools are going to lower the potential or the barrier of entry, right? Allowing greater potential for people to get in there, especially for some of the smaller organizations like Ray was talking about. But do you think that the container platform market is too saturated? Like, that's the first question. And then are there benefits or drawbacks to having more of these types of tools in the market itself?
I mean, I'll jump in real quick just to say, like, I know everybody's seen the current CNCF landscape, right? And it's, I mean, oh my goodness, right? When they designed that chart, they could not have imagined that they would need so many boxes and those boxes would have to be so small. So, just from that standpoint, I know in talking to those folks, like they're thinking hard about like, how do we create kind of threads or use cases or something that lets us run through, while still being vendor neutral, how do we run through just a subset? Because obviously nobody's going to use everything, right? So just from that standpoint, I would say, yeah, we're in a moment of opportunity because of all the things that are available, because you have so many opportunities, so many different products to select from. But it can be hard to navigate that.
Yeah, and Maria,
I feel Eric wants
go ahead
to jump in, then I have something to say, but I want him to.
I don't know if it got mentioned or not, but I'm a CNCF ambassador. And one of the things I think that's really, really strong about that big, massive picture you're talking about is that we're dealing with basically an open source community and a protected environment where ideas can be fostered and grow. And based on usage, the best one's going to win. So everybody has a fair playing field to run that direction. And their idea might be a very small niche, but if they have a following, it's going to be successful, right? And I would rather have the choice. I've always been in the open source world, and I want the choice to find out what the best stuff is. It's how we got Kubernetes. It's how we got containers. It's how we got the Open Container Initiative. It's how we have things like Podman. It's how we have, the choice to do what we want to do and not be locked into somebody deciding to change their license and narrow down the scope and pull stuff back and, all that kind of stuff, which, it's... That's just a bad thing in my opinion. So to kind of answer your question and go the same direction that Alan went, I think it's a really great thing that there's as much choice as possible. And, crap code, crap solutions are not going to get used and they die quickly.
Yeah, just to second up what Eric just said, I think one of the reasons I actually think that there's so much popularity with cloud native technologies, particularly, is the choice that's offered to users, right? Whether you want to start with purely open source solutions, whether you want to start with something that's paid or managed, there are options for you. And I think that is why a lot of developers start with like cloud native technologies. It gives them a lot of choice. Even just look at things like, whether it's from our perspective, security solutions, right? We have amazing cloud native options with that are available for containerized environments with open source solutions. But there are also a lot of managed solutions that the larger organizations that they can leverage, right? So when you think about it, if you are an executive or if you are even an individual developer looking to make these calls, you have choice and you can weigh the pros and cons really well.
Yeah, but you could choose a bad one. So I'm gonna play devil's advocate because I'm allowed to, since I'm the moderator. And then I want to hear from Maria, because you're at that solutions architect level, so you're dealing with this stuff all the time. But I think there's something to say for standardization versus too many options, right? Because with standard, now you might just say, oh, well, now you're going to kill the integrations market. But for the developers, right, the more specialized you get in all these different things, it might be hard. You could say there's more jobs, but it might be harder and you don't know who's better. But anyway, I'm going to say, Maria, what do you want to say? Get in there.
Yeah, I definitely agree with everyone that there is a growing number of container platforms, which can be great. But of course, it makes the choice harder because it gives you like a lot of complexity. There can be like feature overlaps. So by the time you have to decide, you've looked at too many things. But as with everything, competition drives better solutions. So it drives us to make better security, better features, better cost-effective tools. So I think that's the way to go, and that will enable different organizations with different needs to select their individual solutions for the need of the organization itself. So yeah.
I still have to play JDBC and others standardized. All right, no, Kellen, go ahead. Yeah, sorry.
One of the things that always gets me is that, I know I've been around a lot longer than I look like I have, but as much as we talk about, oh, well, this is monolithic, this is modern, it all feeds into each other. It is an ecosystem of data that we're always working with, and data feeds all the way into AI. I don't know how many AI projects I'm on right now that they're getting data from my old relational systems that have been here for 30 years. It doesn't go anywhere. And we've seen this play out. I remember when there were 7 different relational database systems that I should be expected to get into, no matter what industry, no matter what business I went to. And then we went down to about 2. And then the cloud came in and we expanded out again. That is normal. And I think that, as many have spoken about here, is that innovation drives kind of these standards and practices, but recommended practices that build out, and you end up with a platform that makes sense. And that your databases, right now, I see a lot of, I'm in like sales calls, and as an architect, you'll come in and they'll say, Cosmos DB is the answer to everything at Azure. And it's like, no, it's not. No, don't be doing that. It's like saying MongoDB is the answer to everything. No, it's not. You're trying to say, no, store your data in the right format for the solution that you need, and let's create these data lakes that build this. You're coming up with solutions that make sense, but people just see an answer and they start driving everything to it because it's the latest buzzword. We know that. Standardizations happen over time.
Yep. And I'll dig on that just a little bit and move us on. So microservices. Right. One of the reason I was trying to get into standardization is communication between all these things. Right. So microservices are everywhere. We've been talking about it for years. Right. Anybody remember SOA? Built a SOAP app anyway. We'll get Oh, 3.
We're all old.
Got 4 or 5 people. That's awesome. Maria's like, y'all are so old. Anyway, given everything, she's laughing because she knows that's what she was thinking. Giving everything that we just talked about, right? And no, microservices are everywhere. And all the different container management tools. Do you think there's any challenges with that, right? With the building of the microservices for all these different types of tools, and even expand that into integration? And like, what do you see as challenges, and what do you see as potential gains from all of this as you're building out these architectures?
I think a really great example right now of one of the challenges that's evolving in the CNCF around this, and you'll see quite a bit of discussion about it, is when you're dealing with microservices, they're out in the wild, they're floating around, and every time you do some kind of call, it's bouncing through some path. They call it tracing to trace this path. OpenTelemetry right now is the one trying to sort it out, and did a pretty good job in the beginning, but then they got to the point where we now got to do a complete standard on how to do this. And the problem is there's various sorts of telemetry data that you want: metrics, logs, traces, all this stuff. If traces is going to be the one that you decide to sit down and make the standard of, the complexity involved in this is turning every single implementation into a bit of custom work. And that's, all of us are shaking our heads right now going, uh-oh, that hurts, right? That's going to be a legacy problem in your architecture. And I think it's really interesting when you see really complete blog posts about how I migrated from this to OTel and did all this stuff. It's great you went to open standards, but it's accepted standards. It's not official standards. You know what I mean? So it's still in discussion phases, but people are running that direction, and good for them. I mean, that kind of innovation is also needed, but anybody with a bit of experience in building architectures or complex solutions is like getting a little bit of the heebie-jeebies when they hear about all the custom work. It's just that simple. Right. And some of these projects are also putting their custom work back as, plugins, add-ons, whatever that collection you want to call it is. And, they're not always monitored. They're not always maintained. Who's maintaining them? So you're that person looking for the new piece of whatever you need. You find something, you try to use it. It's old. No one's touched it. It was just something that a company made. And it's a bit intimidating out there in this space, I think, right now.
Okay.
And you see the repeat of previous mistakes that we may have already gone through with older technologies.
Yeah.
I mean, that's painful to watch as an older tech.
Yeah.
Yep.
I mean, I see, when I work with organizations, we're talking about open source. I'm a huge open source proponent as well. And I do think the community ends up choosing, the best, the cream of the crop, whatever that happens to be. But the way I look at it in terms of the containerization and microservices and deployment is really no different than, what libraries am I going to use in my Java stack, right? It's just another set of another aspect to the architecture that when you're putting it together for an organization, say, okay, we're going to use this stack, and the stack, goes all the way up to deployment, and so for observability, for example, is a great example. We're going to use this plugin in Java or a Node or whatever because it really feeds great to XYZ observability platform. And you start building, it's a cohesive stack. But to me, it's assembled no differently than we've been assembling applications to Calvin's point for years. Now it's just another layer that we integrate into the overall architecture from day one.
Interesting. Yeah. And go ahead, Swaro. Yeah.
Yeah, I think from my perspective, the biggest challenge I see from this broad adoption of microservices, particularly, is around security broadly across the different environments. So we've seen that as companies adopt different environments and different architectural styles, enforcing consistency of policy across these environments becomes a lot more challenging and a lot more involved. There's some great, amazing work that's various standard bodies have done, especially the CIS community. But when I talk to customers, or when I see what they really struggle around, it's that standardized implementation of security across the different microservice environments they might be adopting as being a big stumbling block / blocker right now.
Okay. But DevOps is something that I want to get through first, right? And specifically around Maria's article, right, on cost savings. So when you look at cost savings, a lot of people look at the CI/CD pipeline, right? Where can we do this? Automation and manual processes. So we asked that question in the survey, and most people said, hey, automation and manual processes, 62% is the biggest. Second, continuous integration, continuous delivery, right? It's the name of the thing, 59%, which is interesting. Infrastructure as code, 58%. They're doing these things to optimize cost. So they're saying that on the list of cost management practices, there's a cloud native pillar, containerization, which came in at 59%, as well as monitoring and analytics. You might even want to go one step further with observability. I know, Eric, I thank you for yes, I see that. But Maria, especially with your article around cost savings, right? Do you see this as a great place where people can mitigate costs within their entire cloud native environment? And as they're doing that, what do you think the biggest challenge is as they're trying to save money here? And then Alan, I want to hear from you from Lockheed next.
Yeah, I mean, definitely the possibilities and containerization helps, as well as monitoring analytics, to understand your resources needs, to understand what your organization needs. And there are a lot of practices that can be done here to optimize the way you use those resources. But I think the biggest challenge, at least what we have at the moment, is because the cloud space is evolving so much and things are so changing rapidly, it's really hard to keep up with stuff, especially when you have costs that can pile up. You have different cloud providers that they introduce different costs at different times. So keeping up with everything is really, really hard to do, and mitigate those changes is really a challenge. Yeah. I think the biggest one, unexpected charges and unexpected costs, that you can't keep up with everything.
Yeah, and I can't even imagine. I would love. I don't know. What do y'all use over there, Alan? What cloud platforms do you use?
Yeah, we obviously, like I was saying, deploy lots of Kubernetes. We've got some pretty good sized internal GitLab environments, and okay. I was really interested in this topic and this discussion in the trend report because from my perspective, we've moved a lot of teams to CI/CD, where traditionally they'd have their own private build space, and We've seen cost advantages from that, elimination of manual processes. It's also driven cost in some interesting ways. Like we run CI/CD pipelines at a rate 100 times what we would have run previously. And, what I think is really interesting about that is that those costs tend to be centralized. We have a team that manages the shared runners that those operate on. The gains of those are distributed. And I've seen that create a couple of interesting challenges. One is, sometimes the teams that are kicking off a CI/CD pipeline all the time and running massive numbers of integration tests and lots of CPU cycles, they don't know that they are driving. Like we've had individual teams trying to do the right thing, and they end up driving double-digit percentage of all of the cost of all of our CI environment for the entire corporation.
How many of y'all have had somebody forget to turn something off?
Yeah, it's exactly that. And
how many's been the person who forgot to turn something off?
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, exactly.
That's right.
Yeah. On the other side, you have the people who are trying to do the right thing of driving out that centralized cost and trying to be as efficient as possible, but it ends up causing us to miss opportunities where really there would have been ROI, there would have been bang for the buck if those teams could have had access to a more robust environment, to more runners, more opportunity to do testing, that kind of thing. So, it's a hard problem. We've, the biggest thing we try to do is just use communication as much as possible to, the more that we can get those centralized teams talking to the end users that are consuming those services and understanding the business value of them, I think, the better we do it at trying to optimize.
That's awesome. We had a bot that would just send a chat out about every 3 days and say, did you forget to turn anything off on Amazon? It was that big of an issue. It was just like every day, just pinging people. But I want to dig into that. So we're using, CI/CD, DevOps, huge way to save money. Is anybody using AI in their release pipelines or anywhere for release management at all? Okay, Kellen, what are you doing?
Oh, I'm early. It's actually being built into the system, so I have to be very careful because I'm under roadmap at this point. Having AI to show where we have resources that can scale down, because of course we're using Kubernetes to build out high IO solutions that are building underneath AI products. So I have to be very careful about this. But AI can definitely see the trends and the workloads that are happening on the system and to say you can scale down these full nodes and you don't need to have them running. That can be very popular. So that's something that we're building out and testing right now.
Very cool. Anybody else using AI or playing with it? It's super fascinating to see. I've got another guy starting to use it for, here's your change of subject, Kellen, security, to try to do some security testing. So there's all kinds of scary questions I have around that. But want to talk a little bit about CNAPPs, right? Cloud native application protection platforms, and move into security. They're all the rage, right? And they're also very important. Right? Security, nobody's going to stand on this call and say that security is not important. But I've noticed, at least with the teams that I'm working with, that these companies are becoming less reliant on their own teams and turning more to third-party outsourced cloud vendors, especially around security. So we did a little question around cloud security threats and concerns at the organization. About half of the respondents selected 4 or more. So 61% selected 4 or more of the 12 threats that we put on there, and 91 selected at least 2. Now, the most commonly selected were access control, 70%, infrastructure security, 64%, and secrets management, 55%. Overall, this helps show how critical things are, but it's also can be scary. So would love your perspective. And Kellen, again, you're going to go first on this security one. But, when we're looking at security and how important it is, right? And I'll let you pick which one of these you want to start answering because there's tons of questions around it. But first, is there danger in outsourcing it, or is it a good thing? Right. And what are the obstacles when switching from what you were doing to one of these platforms?
So I am quite concerned about most of this. I am aware of numerous breaches. I do a lot with healthcare data. And the challenges are is that these are multi-tier systems, no matter if you're talking about the microservices, the data behind the scenes, and I am all about data, of course. I'm on that back end data, especially as they modernize. When we start talking about data lakes, many times they are using formats and flat files that do not have the robust security that's been built over decades into relational systems.
Mm-hmm.
And when I look at something that is built like a file system to protect HIPAA data, PII, GDPR, I freak out. I am totally freaked out by this, that we are expecting these types of protective apps, CNAP, to understand that and comprehend that and be able to protect that data. It blows me away. I was in a conversation yesterday where somebody actually said, we don't really need to encrypt the data as we give this to this third party that was all financial, or not financial, but patient data. And I like choked on my coffee,
Yeah.
I was like, really? We're going to even talk about this. This is a challenge that we have, that as I think when we're in a group, when we're designing things, we are not so much innovation, yes, is data hungry, but AI is even more data hungry. We're making that decision, and somebody in that group you hope goes, no, I would not want my data out there. I'm going to put the brakes on this. I don't think AI and software to replace human intervention in that will ever come into play and win.
Okay. Everybody agree? Disagree? There's a lot of uncomfortable people when you said that.
Yeah,
I thought Swaroop was going to just shrivel up into nothing.
I spent a lot of time in healthcare and fintech, both, and and especially in fintech is banking software, and there's the audit process that goes on every year. It's pretty substantial. Quite frankly, I like to defer to third parties because first of all, your clients, it's kind of like the fox watching the hen house, right? If you get a third party involved, then it actually, the clients look at you and say, okay, you've got somebody else looking at this, you're looking at this, I feel a lot better about this. There's just more eyes and more tech in here. And it doesn't address all the problems that Kellen was just bringing up, but it does give clients a better feel for, hey, there's a team looking at this and it's not just you.
Yeah. I like your view of that too, because I think I was viewing it very differently as a software package that would come in and look for things. And I haven't been real comfortable with what I've seen so far.
Yeah, I think I actually think both Ray and Kellen made a number of different points that's kind of hard to unpack. It's kind of like multiple vectors to unpack there. So if I go too long, Jesse, keep me honest here.
Yeah, keep it short. We're running out of time, man. We're already past 30 minutes.
Yeah, I'll try. But I think let's start with I think the attack vectors, right? I think some of the things that the survey respondents called out are really important and really missteps that happen with cloud native, like access control, infrastructure security, secrets management. These are things we hear quite a bit, but I think it's important not to look at it from a threat perspective, but understand why do we have, let's say, access control problems, secret management problems, right? And I think particularly when it comes to access control, there is when you look at cloud native architecture, especially in a Kubernetes or a containerized environment, you see there are 3 layers of configurational, or 3 layers that play at least at a minimum, right? You have the cloud layer where a lot of configurational steps happen. There is the Kubernetes layer, and then there is the container level, right? So there's 3 levels of, just for one type of issue that you need to think about. Now, think about the challenge or the burden that plays on the the software developer or the infrastructure owner, right? That's a lot of things to keep in play.
Yeah, oh yeah.
So this is just one example, and this extends to vulnerability management, secrets management. There's a lot of complexity behind the scenes that security comes into play that these folks need to take care of. Now, I think folks also mentioned the role of what is the role of third-party players versus owners and infrastructure owners, right? I actually go back to what Google says, or what all the the industry has been saying, which is a true shared responsibility model, or even a shared fate model that some organizations call it. Because honestly, security lies in both the infrastructure provider, the security tooling, but also as a developer, you need to have that mindset of like, if you code it, you need to own the security around it. There is no unencrypted file that you can share with sensitive data. There shouldn't be. You should have the security controls at play that will detect and flag and block that.
Yeah, I'm telling you, the reason that
Yeah.
it's bad for secrets is we have humans that can't keep secrets.
Exactly.
It's that simple.
Or accidentally checks it into code and says like, no, I'm done.
I knew somebody would say that. Yeah.
Right. So you need the tooling and the policy and the infrastructure to be in place. So I think going back to like what Kellen said, right? You need a combination of humans plus machine plus policy plus all these things at play.
I agree with that. Yeah.
Effective. Yeah.
But think I think it's kind of odd that there's no holistic stuff that's mentioned when you did those we call them queries to the people. But very specific
surveys, but yeah, okay,
things.
whatever.
Those little specific things that they're zeroing in on, like, oh, my access control, oh, my networking, oh, this, oh, that.
Yeah.
I'm like, wait a minute, back up. If you cover this holistically, you're pretty much going to put things in your CI/CD that are in place to block all these kind of specific things, right? Takes a holistic view that people are not doing. Yeah.
And people are marrying AI with, because on one side, they're like, well, humans are the problem, so let's use software. And then use software, and they're like, but they're just not going to be as good as really good humans, right? So we keep going back and forth. I think, we can land on a place of using
AI.
Well, so speaking of AI, I'm going to get to my next question, and Eric, you can go first. And I would love to hear again from Alan, but AI in monitoring and observability, right? We're talking about AI, pattern recognition, trying to help us figure out where problems are, where we can, save cost. But what about like anomalies, performance analysis, that kind of thing? We were asking questions around that, and about 50% of organizations said that they do use AI for monitoring and observability, mostly for those things: anomaly detection, performance analysis, and historical analysis. So is that what you're seeing, right, in terms of use cases? Does that match up with what you're saying?
I think you said they had an interest in using. Look real close at what the answer was. There's a very nuanced thing in observability about AI. You have to understand that AI needs the ability to train these models. To do that, you need data. And most of this stuff is happening by using data in the wild, right? Which is fine when you're doing, language pools and things like that, trying to parse language. But when you're talking about internal sensitive data, right? It's proprietary data. And the first thing that you see quite a bit is somebody puts a ChatGPT helper inside of some tool. So when they're trying to do a query to do a dashboard, which is nothing more than querying a database, but it's a special database. It's a time series database, but it's the same thing. You're pumping query languages with variables and actual terms of data and sensitive stuff. And no company in observability wants their stuff pumped all over the place. And so then the next thing you think, okay, no problem. We'll train it with an internal set of data. But then the effectivity or the ability of your AI to be really effective is, reduced from this data set to this data,
down.
Right? Yeah. So your quality is going to be a long time before you can pump enough stuff through that to get something useful out of it. That's not saying that there's not cases for it. I'm just saying it's really hard to find the right ones inside of observability. So some of the tooling may be out there that is able to parse and do like a log analysis and look for anomalies and things like that. That's a bit of the natural language parsing again. And some of the log stuff is, excuse me, being turned into machine readable stuff, right? Like YAML and all that. Mm-hmm. But again, where did they train the models? What did they use to train them? Do you want to let them in to your data? Do you want to give them the ability to do that? And what are they doing with it when they parse it? Are they sending it back out to learn from it? And this is a problem. And the second issue I have is something that's kind of a personal thing that I've been looking at is environmental impact of how they train all this stuff and what that does with the data centers. But that's a little bit different story than here. Happy to talk about that some other time.
And it's a political year. Keep that out of here.
I did want to add on to that I had a customer that was using mass data to actually train their models. And once it went live, they had poisoned their own models with the training data that was masked. Yeah. So this is a real thing. They're trying to protect the critical data and end up poisoning the models over time with that training data. So, AI is going, but I learned from this, and it's like you learned from misinformation. That's what ended up happening. It was crazy.
Man.
And to be fair, when I first started in my master's degree in computer science back in the 90s, AI was a big deal. It was going to be the healthcare solution of the world, right? It was going to automatically diagnose everything. And they got some stuff in there, but not quite, huh? And then, you see it come back around. We're going to fix everything. It's going to be an autocoder. Not quite. You still need eyeballs. You still need people looking at the stuff. I saw two things online by Microsoft developers, one X and one actually in it right now. And they say when they commit their code, they generate AI descriptions, which is going to go into the pull request. And he says, I spend all my time fixing those generated texts. I'm like,
man.
wait a minute, you're an engineer coding at a high, a pretty well-paid high-level job, and you have to mess around with this all the time.
Yeah.
That must be
Hey,
frustrating.
Maria, what are y'all using for, or are you using something on the observability and monitoring side?
AI related or
No, just in general.
Just in general, yeah. We use different tools for monitoring, and we also are integrating it like inside our product. So these are mostly cloud native observability tools for Kubernetes, let's say. So we do have that in our use cases, which is I think it's a pretty great thing to have like a hybrid model, like open source tools that are maybe abstracted a bit from all the complexities, because you really need to have a team that knows how to integrate these tools inside your current infrastructure and application setup. Because at the end, it happens that it could even be more costly. It doesn't matter that the open tools are free and so on, but it can cost you more in the cloud if you don't know what you're doing. So having something that abstracts that and also enables you to use it in a good way is I think a good idea.
Yeah, that's what we saw too. We saw most of the survey respondents said they're using 2 or more tools, and open source was at top, Grafana and Prometheus, right? Y'all saw that. And it's fascinating that about 49% of those who responded said they use both. So it's not, it's right in line with what the numbers are showing. Well, y'all, it's been awesome. It's time for the last question. I promised Kellen at the beginning I would call on her, but as we're wrapping this up, I always love to end, because y'all are the experts out there in the field. I always love to end with y'all telling those who are watching this, any other thoughts, what you think is going to happen in the future, direction of the market, or just advice for people who are getting started, no matter what that is. So if you could just take a minute, each, and say what you would give as advice, or, here's where the market's going, to everyone tuning in.
More of a market trend. I'm seeing a lot more companies retaining their critical data inside the relational systems because they want to protect it. And they're feeding that or copies of that into private LLMs, doing what they need, but not putting it out there. I mean, they're protecting it. Also, the other trend I'm seeing is a lot of visual data that's used with web scraping and other publicly available data to mix with AI to provide value. That's what I'm really seeing. A lot of this idea that we're going to open up our critical data out there, especially in fintech, as we were talking about in healthcare, I'm just not seeing. It's just too vulnerable right now.
Okay. All right, Alan, what do you think, bud?
It's a kind of a trend that we're seeing overall, and things that can go up in data sensitivity, but once they go into an environment, they really never come back out again. I think in terms of trends, like one of the things that I was really interested in with this discussion is we saw a lot of cases of, individual topics across the board that are very high levels of abstraction. We're trying to abstract away all of the security. We're trying to abstract away all of how we look at the data, so we can just ask a chat model to give us an answer and summarize for us. I would say to folks, if you're getting started in the field, those high level abstractions make it really easy to get going. And this is an exciting time, but don't be satisfied. Figure out any abstraction you work with, try to figure out how it works underneath, because that's ultimately how you're going to get expertise. The kind of intelligent conversation you heard today from, as Eric was able to talk about what AI can and can't do in observability, it's because he genuinely understands how those algorithms work and therefore what they're capable of. So, don't be afraid to open black boxes. You're not going to break anything.
Awesome. All right. What'd you think, Ray?
Yeah, it's always great conversation. And like I said at the beginning, I've been working with smaller organizations and getting them on board into cloud native and getting them to realize this isn't for big companies. It's now for everybody, in my opinion. And you can take advantage of all the things we talked about: cost benefit, the density of being able to deploy to Kubernetes clusters, the observability, following standards, and then choosing your vendor for who's going to produce the data or the output for you. It's just another level, as we talked about earlier, of your software architecture, and it's standards based. People are following, and I still believe always the community wins in terms of choosing the best technology out there.
Awesome. All right, Eric.
Yeah, I want to go back to Alan and say thanks for opening the black box. I think you should definitely open it. I think you should dig deep, and I think you should break it as much as you can, because that's where you learn the most from it. I think inside the black box, a lot of people talk about cloud and data and all this kind of stuff. I think you need to get a real good handle on what's happening. So keep digging into it. It's something that I started on the app developer side for a long time, and slowly got sucked into this side where I'm at now, because it's core to what we do. And when you're a new developer coming into this industry and looking for what you're going to do, be curious and understand you own it all, and realize what you're doing, because you're going to do it wrong. You're going to explode things. You're going to send way too much data to your observability platform. You're going to do cardinality explosions. You're going to do all kinds of fun stuff, but that's how you learn. And I think AI to add in that little bit here from Kellen is definitely something that's around a bit, but I don't think it's going to take over the world, replace any of us or any of that kind of thing. I think it's going to be like one of those little chair assists that gets us up the stairs when we're too old to walk up the shelves. So
awesome. So you think I'm real then?
I don't really.
All right, Maria. Maria, what do you think?
Yeah, similarly, like Ray, we also work more with smaller companies. So what we are seeing is increased focus on cloud native security right now. So there is a need to integrate solutions and to educate more the developer community. And also, like everyone, I don't think AI will replace us, and I don't think it should take over our cloud native operations, but I think it will become more deeply integrated into all aspects of cloud native operations. And then that we just need to be here for it and basically guide it through to help us be better and do better things.
Very cool. All right, Swart, wrap us up, man.
Yeah, I'm actually going to take a very positive spin. I actually think AI has got a lot of flack recently because of like large models and whatnot. But I'm actually very bullish on AI. I see some of the new trends coming out in terms of small learning models and so on and so forth. I think there's some real use cases, particularly around observability, around code security, that are very valuable. So very bullish on AI in general. I think security is a big concern, but we're seeing some very positive trends here. I think the work that a lot of the standard bodies have done, CNCF, CIS, the Linux Foundation, particularly around DevOps security, that's very promising. So hooray for all open standards that everyone can adopt and use. And I think also overall, security is platforms like CNAP have made security a lot more approachable for even individual developers, where you had like 100 different things that you needed to implement. Now you have a single platform that can solve a range of use cases. I think it's overall a positive trend. So very excited about, I take a very positive spin to wrap it up, saying that I'm actually very bullish across the range of topics we spoke about today.
Yeah, that's awesome. And thank you all so much for participating. It was a lot of fun. I go back to Alan's thing where we talk about boxes. I'm a pretty organized human being, and I love to categorize, organize, and put all my hobbies and things into boxes. And sometimes we don't like it when life gets messy or things aren't where they want to be. So that idea of, taking that black box, experimenting, trying things, learning how to understand it, cloud native and all of the different places it's seeping into is a lot like that, right? We want to encourage you all listening. Hopefully you got a lot out of the conversation today on things you can try, things you can test. Please don't test in production. I feel like I have to, feel like I have to say that. But don't keep those things in a box, right? Everything around cloud native, we talked about security and all the different places it's going. AI, observability, all of these areas, we need to take them out of whatever box we're trying to put them in for good, because they're going to get there anyway. So the possibilities and opportunities are limitless. I agree with Saru. I think it's going to be great. So thank you so much, Wiz and Chronosphere, especially to you guys for sponsoring our conversation today. I hope that you all out there listening got so much out of our panelists. We had a really great time. And if you found our conversation valuable and want to see more content like this, head on over to dzone.com/events to see all of our on-demand content. Thanks so much. Have a great day.